How now shall we live? Until the politicians get it figured out how to handle these mass slaughter shootings, the question today is, what do you do? What do I do in the meantime? This is Bill Whittle Now. I'm Scott Ott. And Bill, it occurs to me that it may still be a long time before there's any kind of agreement across the country on the approach to avoiding these kinds of mass slaughter situations. We did a previous episode this week of Bill Whittle Now in which you talked about some ideas which would help, including following an FBI profiler's guidance on how to deal with the aftermath of these shootings by avoiding publicizing the name of the shooter, by not referring to any sort of manifesto that he was trying to promote out there.
And never, ever show his picture under any circumstances.
Exactly, and sort of steal the glory from his blaze of glory, as in his crazed and suicidal mind, the way he pictured it. But Bill, that's something that's beyond most of our control as well. What I want to focus on in this particular episode is, let's just make the assumption that politicians aren't going to do anything. I think that's a fairly safe assumption. And I guess the question then becomes, how do we live in this new world of increasing numbers of these violent attacks in public places? Specifically, I made a list of things, and you can take them in any order. This is how do we avoid being a victim? How do we anticipate problems? How do we confront budding threats? And in all of that, how do we avoid being a doomsday prepper?
There's a lot there. For those of you watching at home or in the office or wherever you happen to be watching this, I suspect that today's question, I never know what they are in advance, had something to do with the conversation Scott and I had yesterday after the end of our segment on the on how publicizing these mass shooters incentivizes them. And what I'm about to say is pretty straightforward, really. And I want to get to why I'm about to say it. So let me just say it, then I'll say why we have to say it, then we can get into some specifics if you don't mind. When you get right down to it, what you're basically saying, Scott, is that we no longer live in a world where we didn't have to worry about our own safety. That little bubble of almost unimaginable security was created by a system of laws and an economic system that provided so much release for destructive tendencies, but much more importantly was so much more cohesive. People were more closely knit together. And when I say you're able to spot people who might be potential shooters earlier, I don't mean by the FBI or even in the classroom. I mean, your dad says there's something wrong with Timmy, there's something pretty wrong with him. And having the presence of fathers, all the rest. So we are coming out of a period that's almost unique that I'm aware of in human history. And we are coming out of the period where you did not have to worry about defending yourself. If there's another time in human history where this was the case, I'm unaware of it. But certainly in the United States since, I don't know, probably 1880, 1890, right up until about 1990, 2000, somewhere in there, 120-year run, something like that, we lived in a society where we didn't have to worry about our own security, that these kind of things were so unheard of that you really could just walk into a store, walk on an airplane, walk anywhere you want to, and just be happy to sit and play with your kids and talk to your wife and whatever the case may be. But for the enormous majority of human history, that's not been the case. And I'm not happy about this. I liked living in a world where I didn't have to worry about anything. But it was predicated on a set of conditions, and those conditions have been changed, and so the world has changed. So basically what is happening now and what people need to be aware of, and if you really are genuinely concerned about wanting to do something about it, you're going to have to do something that you're going to find unpleasant. And I know you're going to find it unpleasant because Scott and I talked about it yesterday. Scott found it unpleasant, and when it dawned on me quite a while ago, I found it unpleasant too. But there it is. You are going to have to be responsible for your own safety, and you're going to have to be responsible not only for the safety of your family, but if you really understand this, you also are going to find yourself becoming responsible for the safety of the people around you. And the two things that I can boil this down to are, number one, keep your eyes open, and number two, have a plan. And this is how I've personally managed to survive 3 engine failures in single-engine airplanes when I see people with partial engine failures getting killed all the time. I was trained to keep my eyes open and have a plan. That meant that every time I took off in an airplane, I fully expected the engine to fail, and I expected to fail at the worst possible moment. So that when I did have those 3 engine failures, they didn't happen at the worst possible moment. So I was ready. I had a plan. I knew what to do, and I was looking for the signs. I was watching for warnings. We can get into the specifics of this in a moment. But if you're one of those people who are determined that this is not your responsibility, that it's the responsibility of the government or the responsibility of somebody or something to get rid of those guns or get rid of whatever it takes to make you safe and so on, that is an illusion that you grew up with. It's a lovely illusion. Believe me, I don't like parting with it. But nevertheless, it is an illusion. And if you're going to be a fully functional human being, man or woman, you're going to have to reach a point somewhere in your life when you're going to recognize that you alone are responsible for your own safety and survival and that of those people around you that you care about, even the ones you don't care about.
It occurs to me, Bill, that a lot of the conversation after shootings like this swells up around what can government do. And that's coming even from conservatives who believe in smaller government. I almost get the sense, Bill, that we've lost the other sense of what conservatism is all about, which is something that was called, and now laughably so, but it was called rugged individualism.
Yeah, or self-reliance or whatever now it's toxic masculinity or whatever the case may be. I don't mean to make this whole episode about telling tales after school, Scotty, but I just thought I thought it was an interesting point. After the episode yesterday, we were talking about how Scott had gone to see a movie with his wife, and he's looking around and he's surveying the mall and saying that guy might be a potential problem. That's an escape route. Doing all of these situational awareness things that you can train yourself to do. And Scott said to me, we were talking about this idea of manhood and so on. And Scott said, I had a great grandpa, but he never sat down and taught me how to look through a crowd for threats and how to figure out escape routes and come up with a plan. He never taught me that. And I said, yes, but he let you climb trees, right? And that pretty much, I think, was the answer for both of us. Once we heard that, we knew it was true. It may seem trivial to you out there watching this, but believe me, it's not. It's the essential quality here. If you're allowed to go out as a little boy and climb trees, or even especially if you go climb trees when you're not allowed to, you are learning a number of essential survival skill sets, and not just for survival in terms of survival against gunfire. You're learning a bunch of skill sets that will improve the quality of your life throughout the rest of your life. You're learning what risks to take. You're learning how to take them. You're learning the consequences of taking a risk that you shouldn't have taken. You fall out of the tree. There have probably been a few kids killed falling out of trees. I never saw one. I never heard of one, but I did hear of broken bones every now and then. And when I say climbing a tree, it's not just climbing a tree, but it's that entire lifestyle that we grew up with where as children, and I mean children, 6, 7 years old, you went out to play, and as long as you were home by dark, that's when dinner is, have a good time. And during those years and years and years, as essentially infants, certainly as children, we began to realize that after our parents told us to look both ways crossing the street, we may have an attempt to cross the street and we didn't look both ways and something nearly happened and you learn a lesson. And the number of people who were actually seriously hurt by this procedure was never very high. But it gave everybody a sense that they are their own commanders. They're on their own. You can rely on friends who are with you if they're good friends. And by all means, cultivate good friends. But these kind of lessons were part of play. And this is why I think this is so important. People, you hear this all the time. People talk about play. I'm talking about childhood play now. As something that is the most frivolous and silly thing that you can do. That childhood playing is essentially just a complete waste of time. It's the exact opposite. Childhood playing is training for life. It's a simulator for what life is going to be. It allows you to learn how to make decisions when the consequences are small, so that when the consequences get larger, your decision-making skills will be more or less in place. And so if you've decided that you're going to build a a wall around every single swimming pool in California so that kids don't go in there, climb over your fence, drown in your pool, and then sue you for all the money you have. That is one way of looking at the problem of protecting your kids from drowning. The other way is to teach your kids how to swim. And parenthetically, to teach them not to jump over fences of property that belong to other people. And this teaching your kids how to swim thing is hard work, and it requires courage on the part of the parents, and it requires a genuine commitment to making your child into a fully functioning, happy adult, rather than going the easy route and trying to be your child's best buddy.
It seems, Bill, that there are two kinds of people in the wake of these kinds of awful incidents. One is people, everybody recognizes that something has happened to the integrity of the bubble in which we live. So that's universal. Everybody says there's something wrong with the bubble. Mm-hmm. A lot of people say, restore the bubble. Protect the bubble, increase the thickness of the walls of the bubble so that we can be safe. Yes. And another much smaller group of people says there is no bubble. There never really has been. We were living in an illusion. And frankly, Bill, those kind of people, the people who go out and say, hey, I'm going to get myself a concealed carry permit and purchase a handgun now, are seen in this era as fringe characters.
Lunatics.
How do you go about this without marginalizing yourself from society or feeling like you've just kind of stepped outside of civilization?
Well, first of all, I'd strongly recommend that if you have a concealed carry permit and you're watching the show, then you're the kind of person that's aware of the kind of things I'm talking about, which is generally surmised as the sheepdog attitude, and I don't need to get into what that is right here. But first of all, if you're in answer to your specific question, you need to ask yourself: are you more concerned with potentially saving the lives of your wife and kids, or are you more concerned about what liberals in the New York Times are going to say about you? To me, this is not a difficult decision. But when you talk about going back, Scott, this is a very important point, and it's one on which we're misunderstood quite a bit, and I know I personally misunderstood quite a bit. The way to get back to the bubble is not to have everybody walking around with a gun strapped to their hip. Because back then, there were certainly more concealed weapons than there are now, but I have no perception of ever seeing a gun on a civilian in my entire childhood. I don't think I ever saw it once. So it's not the fact that everybody's walking around armed. What's really changed is a general coarsening of the culture. In other words, the gradual acceptance of behaviors that may on the margin seem like no big deal, but over time, the allowable behavior that people would tolerate has precipitously dropped. But much, much, much more importantly than all of that junk together is the absence of fathers. I mean, this is really the issue here.
So this is a societal problem, Bill, and we talked about this in the previous episode, and I refer our customers, our viewers, to those episodes. But I want to specifically deal with, okay, so there's an absence of fathers. What do you do? Forget about the concealed carry or the self-defense kind of aspects of this. How can you be a better neighbor, a better member of your community in the sense that you're anticipating and being able to intervene in some way in Timmy's got a problem situations?
Okay, well, let's deal with the general walking into the mall with your family thing first. Situational awareness, this is what this is called, is a habit, and it's something that can become a habit. It's a technique that can become a habit if you practice it often enough. And what I found, and I hate to go back to the flying, it's just flying is heightened reality in terms of the danger level. Personal general aviation flying, being on an airlane, you're much safer than you are in your house. So what we're really talking about here is the idea of having a plan. And my experience and the experience of virtually every pilot I ever spoke to was that during our flight training, the lesson didn't occur while we were flying the airplane. The lesson occurred when we were driving home from the airport and the next day, when we would start rehearsing in our minds the things that we had done right, the things that we had done wrong, and how we would have changed that situation. So situational awareness is a skill that can be cultivated through simple determination to cultivate it. Situational awareness simply means this: I don't like the looks of that guy. That guy looks suspicious to me. Doesn't matter what that guy looks like, and it's a guy. It's this idea of this violence being caused. I don't need to say men and women, because the number of women that are committing these kind of offenses statistically is essentially zero. So there's something about that guy I don't like, or there's something about this place that feels wrong, or I'm in a crowd of people, and if somebody started firing now, what would my son and I do? Where would we go? What would we do? I find myself on certainly on airplanes, and I get on an airplane, I walk right down the road, try to sit in the back, and I'm checking, is this guy's a potential ally? I can tell this guy's got some stuff here. I'm a little shady-looking character over here. But at least be aware of your situation. And often, Scotty, the best thing you can do for your family survival in a case of a shooter like this is, where is the nearest exit? And more importantly, if everybody is going to the nearest exit, where can I go to get out? Because if there's 50 people standing in front of a door, that's not the place you want to be. But look, I understand the criticism that I'm opening myself up for by saying things like this. I understand. I know what some people are going to say. They're going to say, "Oh, you're Mr. Action Man," and all the rest of it. I'm not that at all. I've performed well in some emergencies. I hope to perform well in the future ones. And the thing I'm most afraid of is that I won't. The thing I'm most afraid of is that I'll freeze up or chicken out. I'm terrified.
It takes a different kind of mentality. In essence, I'm almost wondering if it takes a different kind of man than the ones we've created. And some of the things, like you indicate, are simple things. For example, when we go to a restaurant, my wife knows that I'm going to sit so that I can see the doors. She just knows that's, and it works out nicely because she doesn't like to stare at the windows because the light hurts her eyes. So that works well.
Let me just throw one thing in, just one thing specifically about that one specific deal. Men have been sitting facing the doors as long as there have been doors. And it's only this last 100 years or so when people have not even, probably even the last 50, 60, 70 years, we haven't had to worry about that. But the idea of you having to sit so you can see the door is something that would not have been a mystery under any circumstances to anybody living before 1880, let's say, in this country. And I just wanted that to be pointed out. This is how life works.
They're starting to get more realistic about the way they do corporate training, too, for active shooter situations. It used to be that basically the whole strategy was run and hide. Now it's basically run, hide, and fight. And at some point, I think they're going to realize that fight needs to move up in the order of service. Because the more you let this person wander freely, the more mayhem is sown, the more people are injured or killed.
Let's go to this to the most extreme example we can think of, because often by going to extremes you clarify situations that aren't quite as delineated. Let's say that you find yourself on an airliner and somebody gets up in the front of the room and they say they have a bomb, and somehow they manage to get a pistol on board, and just to prove that they're not messing around, they shoot a flight attendant or something like this. And they've determined that they're going to hijack this airplane. You are now faced with an exceedingly unpleasant set of choices. If you could get the entire cabin to help you, this would be over very quickly, but you can't count on that. And so what I'm basically trying to say here is this, in terms of fighting back. If it was up to you alone to throw your shoes, your phone, and keys, everything you had at that guy, charge down the aisle, roaring and screaming, and try and tackle him, those are not some situation I'd like to put myself in. But people have survived gunshot wounds, and they've survived multiple gunshot wounds, but no one has ever survived going into the ground at 600 miles an hour. And so if you find yourself in a situation that horrible, and that's what it is, you need to take a pretty hard look at what the consequences for non-action are. And if this guy is simply walking through a cafeteria shooting people as they hide under tables, then hiding under tables may not be your best bet. We tend to think of these shooters as automatons, because they seem incredibly cool, and they seem, when I say cool, I mean unemotional. And the reason that these shooters often seem so emotional is because they're doing the exact kind of thing I was just talking about, except in reverse. They're rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing. I think you said yesterday, some of these shooters have said, I've been planning this for 2 years. It's pretty much every night before you go to bed. They run it through their mind. What are they going to do? That's why they seem relatively calm and relatively methodical, because they didn't just snap and walk into a store. They've been planning this for a long time. They've rehearsed it in their head. And that gives you the illusion that these guys are SEALs who are highly trained individuals incapable of fear. That's not true. if you yell at somebody, when I don't say yell across the room, if you charge somebody and scream, they're going to have that same adrenaline reaction, which is going to cause them to shake and move and all the rest of it. And to assume that this is a Terminator killbot from the future without any human emotions, that you have no chance against a guy like this, is to start out the fight by losing it. If I was on an airplane that was being hijacked, I would, if no one was doing anything, I would duck my head down behind the chair so nobody could see I was talking, and I would say very loudly, I'd say, when I say go, hey, take everything you have and throw it at this guy. Don't do it until I say go, but throw everything you have at this guy, phones, shoes, purses, bags, anything you got. Just throw it at this guy and don't stop throwing it. And then I would say, anybody who's coming with me, it's time to go now. Ready? Here we go. Boom. And then I know people say, yeah, that's easy to say now, and it is easy to say now. I'm not saying that I guarantee you I would do this, but this is your only chance. And I do believe, in my heart, I really do believe, that the more times I rehearse that in my head, the more likely I become to be able to do something like that. And so if you are determined that you don't want to become a victim to this kind of thing, we have to acknowledge first that sometimes there are situations that are simply beyond your control, no matter whether you're armed or whether you're prepared. Sometimes there's just nothing you can do. But since this question was about what people can do as individuals, people can do a lot. And what you will find is that a certain kind of person will not only find a way to get their family out of a burning theater, they'll find a way to get everybody else out too. And that kind of person has been given a gift, and to not be aware of it and cultivate it and try as hard as possible to inculcate that particular kind of thinking, not only in your own children, but in anyone you come into contact to not be able to try and share that gift for the general safety of everybody is kind of a sin, I think.
We want to thank the members at BillWhittle.com who've made this program possible. We look forward to the day when we don't have to talk about issues like this. And we know it's people like you, people who are watching right now, who've persisted through 20 minutes of this kind of conversation, who are really the hope for the future. We're grateful to you for watching. Please share this with as many people as you can. If you'd like to become a member at BillWhittle.com, just go to that website and click the Become a Member link. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members for making this happen.